Good evening, ladies. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the November 6, 2007 meeting of the Glendale Housing Authority, being called to order at 2:35 p.m. We have a roll call.
Authority members Draymond.
Here.
Mincy.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Parazian.
Here.
Quintero.
Here.
Yusefian.
Here.
Chairman Weaver.
Here. We have your report.
The agenda for the November 6, 2007 regular meeting of the Glendale Housing Authority was posted on Thursday, November 1st, 2007 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. And next,
Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. Second.
and with one abstention,
Yes.
yeah, Laura will abstain. With that, says Parazian absent.
No, that was the roll call.
Yeah.
There was
Oh, for this closed session.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I didn't read further down. Okay. There was a motion, a second. The minutes will stand approved as submitted. Next, please.
Next is oral communication. Discussion is limited to items not part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Members of the Housing Authority may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The matter may be referred to staff through the Executive Director for investigation and a report.
Thank you. I have one speaker on the new enlarged ADA compliant cards, Herbert Milano.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver, members of the Housing Authority and city staff. My name is Herbert Milano. You know, I've been coming to these meetings for several years, and I think that by now I have a fairly good sense of how policy is developed and the direction that City Council gives the staff. And I think that we have a significant opportunity to truly pay attention to the community development side of housing and community development. I think that a lot of our energies, or at least your energies, are spent significantly on the issues of housing and the opportunities that it affords many individuals to finally obtain some type of affordability. But it is my contention that irrespective of all of the tens of millions of dollars that go into housing, relatively very few families actually get impacted by it. And yet we have significant opportunities to really address the needs of literally hundreds, if not thousands, of residents in the city if your policies and your objectives were to take a slightly different direction, or if you were to pay more attention to the social issues of the city of Glendale. You know, we have a city that is, I think, fairly unique. First of all, it's a city that is relatively manageable as opposed to larger cities like Long Beach or the city of LA. It's got good, strong finances, which is also a big help. And it's a city in which pretty much you can get to know the city council and members of the authority can get to really know the city intimately. And it is a shame that we don't spend a lot more time really looking at the demographics of our society. I come to you with that experience that I had when I was member of the booster club for the Glendale High School football team. And I remember how at the parent meetings, it was primarily women who were there. You know, generally female head of households trying to obtain for their sons an environment where they could have some type of support, mentoring. And the coach, in effect, became the surrogate father. The effect that this particular program had, the football program, for many of these kids who were at risk, was fairly significant. These kids became better students, they got into trouble less, they really became part of something. And it is what is so often attractive to many kids when they become part of a gang, for example. But in this case, they were belonged to something. And the cost to basically get that type of improvement was roughly $300 per year per player. Now, I look at the city's budget, and I look at the tremendous amount of money that has gone into salaries, especially in the last 8 years. Tens of millions of dollars of excess money going into overtime. We look at the tens of millions of dollars that goes into development work. And the focus that you guys bring is usually on development, is zoning and development. But how much time have you spent in the last few months really looking at the social state of the city? It's my contention that people who run for city council with the objective of solving problems. And I think that the opportunity that this city council has and the housing authority has to truly address social issues, the impact statewide could be incredibly significant. It is the high school dropout that eventually will become a problem to society. It is the high school dropout who's going to have problems with their families and having some type of sustainability. And then we don't mind addressing the issue of sustainability by providing affordable housing. Why not provide the solutions towards ensuring that kids graduate, to providing the assistance to the high schools in a way that we provide the sustainability after high school with the high school programs for after school. Every dollar invested in the community development side of things, I think it's going to render for us a significant greater benefit than the tens of millions of dollars that generally go into housing. If we are able to resolve it, and I think that this city has the wherewithal, both financially and with a fairly highly qualified staff, to be able to address these issues effectively. And I think there's an opportunity that I don't believe that we are taking to truly grab this problem completely and make some significant headway towards resolving some of the social problems that we have. Thank you.
I have no more cards on communication. Our communication's closed. What is next, please?
Next is a business agenda, and at 6A is Director of Community Development and Housing regarding development of an affordable rental housing project with supportive services for formerly homeless and disabled families located at 615 Chester Street. At 6A1 is resolution approving an affordable housing agreement with the Salvation Army for the development of an affordable rental housing project. At 6A2 is resolution appropriating $660,000 to provide funds for the project.
Yeah, I'm going to Mr. Starbird, who's going to
I'll
Mr.
go to
Blake,
Madam
who's
Blake.
going to Mr. Zovak.
That's correct.
Getting good at this.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the Housing Authority. Back in 2006, the authority entered into an exclusive negotiation agreement with the Salvation Army. And the purpose of the ENA at that time was to negotiate terms and conditions of an affordable housing agreement that will provide for the development of an affordable housing rental project with supportive services for formerly homeless, disabled households at 615 Chester Street. As a result of those negotiations, an agreement has been prepared and is before you today for consideration. According to the terms of the agreement, the Army will design, finance, and build 4 residential units that will be reserved as affordable housing to low-income households. The site is 615 Chester Street. It was acquired by the Army back in September of 2003 with its own funds. The site is immediately adjacent to an existing Salvation Army-owned property and affordable housing project, the Nancy Painter House. The Nancy Painter House operates as a transitional housing project for formerly homeless families and has done so since 1991. The Army will work with local social service providers through the Continuum of Care Network to identify suitable formerly homeless families that have initiated changes and taken steps to retaining self-sufficiency. In addition, supportive services will also be provided to the residents of the project here. The total costs of the project are estimated to be approximately $1.8 million. Of that, the Army will be contributing approximately $730,000 towards development. That includes about $475,000 that they put out for acquisition of the property, as well as about $256,000 in the added capital contribution to the project. In addition, the project has also received an award from HUD of Supportive Housing Program funds, SHP funds, in the way of a capital grant for approximately $400,000. So the remaining gap of the project is $660,000, which is what we are considering today the Housing Authority to fill. And I should mention that in addition to the HUD capital grant, the Army also received from HUD an operating grant, an initial 3-year grant of approximately $238,000 that will be used to provide the supportive housing services to the clients at this project. It is a 3-year grant initially and then renewed annually for up to 20 years by HUD. Since approval of the ENA, the project has obtained all zoning entitlements, and that includes Design Review Board, both 1 and 2, received very many positive results and comments of that meeting, as well as zoning administrator approval for 2 concessions that they received having to do with parking and setbacks of the project. The project has submitted for building plan check. It has gone through a first plan check review. The architect is preparing their revisions and will be submitting it again. So we expect and anticipate a building permit to be issued sometime in December next month, and then construction starting soon after the new year. And lasting approximately shouldn't be more than a 12-month construction period. The funding being proposed for the Housing Authority assistance is our home funds in the amount of $660,000. At the time that the authority adopted the 07-08 housing program budget, $660,000 in home funds were tentatively reserved for this project and is available. Today, we have members of the Salvation Army, both the regional group and the local Glendale office, to answer any questions you might have, as well as a representative from Onyx Architects, Steve Kaczynski, who could take the authority through the design of the project, if you wish.
I do have speaker cards.
Oh, do
after.
you, go ahead with that first.
Okay.
No questions?
Thank you. We'll go through the speaker cards. I've got 4, and I want to make sure with these new cards, 2 people put in for the joint, to speak at the joint meeting. Jim Sloan, did you mean this one, though?
Yes, sir.
And Steve Kaczynski, you meant this one, too, right? Okay. Start with them. Oscar Guzman, you're first.
I'll speak if necessary.
If necessary. Steve, if necessary, or do you want to? Just your name for the record.
Steve Kaczynski with Onyx Architects, and thank you very much for this opportunity to present the project to you. Basically, we have taken a site that was bisected, if you will, or cut up by the 134 freeway, and ended up with a very kind of unusual wedge shape, as you can see from the plans before you. And we've been able to kind of maximize it by getting 4 units on there. 2 of which are over parking garages, and then 2 of which stack on top of each other. We have 1 unit that provides full wheelchair accessibility, and the remaining units are available, again, for persons with other special needs. So, at this point, the interesting component of the design was that due to the unusual shape of the site, we needed to emphasize the front elevation, which you can see on your upper right corner there. Even though it's a very narrow building, we've worked to emphasize it through the use of gables and balconies, and we received very, very positive comments from design review. So we're excited about doing the project, and I just want to let you know I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Questions? To yourself.
Do you have a drawing that can explain how you drive to those parking? I mean, the first one is easy. I can understand it. How do you get to the back parking?
I unfortunately don't have a large-scale drawing to show everyone, but if you turn to page 3 of your handout there, basically you go down the driveway, and each garage has a full back-out space of 25 feet.
Well, you just drive straight through, right?
So
We're looking at where you go to the next building. Sorry.
You drive off of Chester Street into here, and you can turn into these parking garages, and there is enough back-out space behind these that meets full city requirements.
The next building.
And the next building, likewise, the shape of the site actually jogs back here, so that these have full back-out space.
But to get it, you get
How
in
do you
from
get to that?
Chestnut.
Yeah.
Same location, right?
Right down this driveway here, yes.
Also, you drive right through there?
Yes.
And that green line, what is that?
Which green line is that?
The green between the bricks, is that?
Oh,
the
that's
brick.
just a paving accent color.
It looks like grass, but that's not really grass.
So it's not grass?
No, it's a paving accent color.
Oh, okay, so that's what my confusion was. I thought that was part of landscaping.
No.
All right, so both of these are just concrete? concrete and just
Yes.
paving? Okay, so it's just a driveway, just giving it some design to it.
Right, right. And
All right.
hopefully the sweeping motion of the pattern helps lead you back towards the units.
Okay, I
Broke up the linear.
Yeah.
got it.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you.
Okay.
Steve Lytle, you wish to speak?
Only if necessary.
Only if necessary. Jim Sloan? Only if necessary. That takes care of work. Have
Move 6A, 1 and 2.
cards?
Second.
Mr. Mincy.
We have the Nancy Painter project is such a success, and this being right next door, they've talked to the neighbors. We also have the funds available. They're a good organization, and I certainly wholly support it.
Thank you. Mr. Okay, did you have your hand up first, Mr.?
I didn't have my hand up at all.
Okay, I get you. Mr. Quintero, then Mr.
Well, like Mr. Mincy, I'm very happy that the neighborhood bought into it. I love the design. That's a very difficult lot. I think the architect did a good job of working it in there, and with the supportive services, this is going to be an excellent, excellent idea for families that have had their problems and are on the way back. And I think the financing is very good, too. We brought in a lot of different grants on this, so congratulations to the Salvation Army.
Mr. Najarian.
I have some questions, not about the design or the placement, but concerning the target population. And in the report, several instances, but in particular page 5, fourth paragraph, it says the project will be reserved for occupancy by low-income, formerly homeless, disabled families. Does that mean that they're formerly disabled or they're currently disabled?
Ms. Blake.
I think I can answer that. It means that they are
Disabled.
formerly homeless clients who were disabled
Still are disabled?
and still would be considered disabled.
Okay.
And that's why the point of the additional support services and case management is an important component of this.
Okay. The term disabled, as it applies to the homeless programs, reading from the text, is one in which at least one person has a diagnosable substance abuse disorder, I think it should read, a serious mental illness, developmental disability, or chronic physical illness or disability, including a co-occurrence of two or more of these conditions. Does the Salvation Army have the legal ability to discriminate against substance abuse disorders in favor of those with chronic physical illness or those with developmental disability? My concern is that despite the best efforts at screening, as it states, someone with a diagnosable substance abuse order, let's call them addicts, or someone with a serious mental illness, and there's various different categories of that, could be placed in this neighborhood. It would be my preference that there be some degree of discretion to give priority to those with developmental disabilities or chronic physical illness. Is such a preference permitted under the law?
Ms. Blake.
I'll defer to the city attorney on that, but I just want to make a little differentiation on the definition of this disability. We talked at length a couple of weeks ago about the continuum of care and the need to address the issue of chronic homeless. By the time an individual or family gets to this point, this is considered permanent housing, permanent affordable housing. It's at the end of the continuum after transitional housing. And so they may have come into the continuum with such a disability and need continued support. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that they would be considered able to enter the program if they couldn't function, because by this time they have to actually help support the rent, and so they have to be able to function, and that's part of the criteria for the, as I say, it's permanent affordable housing. And I'll defer to the city attorney on the other issue.
Mr. Chairman, members of the authority, I don't know the specific answer with respect to this particular program, the SHP program, and maybe somebody from the applicants can speak to that. There are state laws as well that prohibit the discrimination, prohibit against discrimination of people who have substance abuse disorders, and requires that they be treated the same as any other user of housing within a particular neighborhood. But I think we would have to take a closer look at whether or not this particular federal program has specific requirements of giving preferences to people who have one type of physical or mental disability as opposed to substance abuse disorders.
I've seen the Nancy Painter House, and it's well-run, and it's well-operated, but I don't believe that those residents are disabled. I believe they're formerly homeless, aren't they?
They're all formerly homeless, and the Nancy Painter House is a transitional housing project for formerly homeless disabled households. This proposed project is a permanent affordable housing project for that same clientele. So as Ms. Blake had mentioned, a household would have to graduate and be prepared to move from transitional supportive housing to permanent supportive housing. And if at any point in time that the household is not complying with the terms of the project and the terms and conditions of their supportive housing program, they could be terminated from the occupancy of the unit. The Nancy Painter House has disability requirements exactly the same as this proposed project here. And so you have that clientele. One particular month, if you were to survey the families living in the Nancy Painter home, some might be disabled. You might find a disabled household. In terms of a physical disability, you may not. It might be households that disability might be substance abuse or a mental condition disorder.
I'm not sure. I mean, from what I'm reading in the report, it says that they are going to be reserved for occupancy by low income, formerly homeless. I understand that. But they're disabled.
Right.
So if they're not disabled, let's say someone's no longer a substance abuser, they're not disabled anymore. Is that correct? And they wouldn't be eligible, therefore, for this?
I don't know. Yes.
Mr. Sloan.
Or once an addict, always an addict.
Yes, that's the approach that we take, and the fact that there's ongoing case management, Mr. Mayor, indicates that the disability is still in place, and that we would be doing, for example, a drug addict would be having daily touch with a case manager, would also be having regular drug tests, would be required to go to 12-step meetings, would be required to go to doctor's appointments if there was mental illness. So what we're trying to do is make sure that there's not a slip back to previous status when they're in our home. That's the purpose for the ongoing social services case management.
And what rights do you have if you do see someone slipping back, let's say, to drug use?
There's
Is that part of his disability that he's there for in the first place?
We don't believe that. We don't believe that people have to slip back. We believe that there's accountability issues that they buy into when they come into our program. They sign program agreements that allow us to hold them accountable to issues such as drug testing, those kinds of things. And if they fail to do that, we would terminate them from the program.
And you would be within your rights to do that?
Yes, sir.
Not to mention that current drug or let's say drug use, which it's illegal, may engender a possible police action as well.
Correct.
Which would ultimately have the same effect of removing them from the program. Let me also comment on your earlier question. I agree with what Mr. Garcia noted, that I think we're going to have to look at whether this particular federal program allows us to distinguish. I can tell you, though, from my research in other areas, you're looking at, but given the breadth of all, covering essentially all mental and physical disabilities, if you begin to parse between them, you start running the risk of violating either potentially ADA or EEOC guidelines when you begin to exclude one form of disability from a housing project as opposed to another, and then there are some regulations related to that. So we'll look at both that and whether in this particular project we can favor one type of disability, if you will, over another. But I've seen cases where you've actually run into issues involving EEO guidelines and alleged discrimination for failing to include individuals who are rehabilitating from drug or alcohol abuse.
Well, I understand that, and
we'll certainly take a look at it.
I mean, I certainly, we try to be fair to everybody, but as a member of the authority, I would feel much more comfortable if the residents with a physical disability, or chronic physical illness, or developmental disability were housed, rather than the ones with serious mental illness or a diagnosable substance abuse disorder. And that's just my opinion. Perhaps you can't discriminate the way I can,
No.
but that's...
No, that's true, Mr. Mayor. But the other part of it, the pragmatic part of it, is that we simply don't get applicants with the physical disabilities, such as in a wheelchair. In Nancy Painter, 5 years that I've been involved with it, we've not had a single applicant. In speaking with other providers, they get very few people in this situation. So we have one unit that is accessible without barriers on the ground floor. The other three would be for varying disabilities, which could include physical disabilities, but it would require, not the elevator. So we're not precluding all four of them being physical, but it would not necessarily be that way.
I would also hope that you would do a outreach here in Glendale and even the surrounding areas and see if you can contact some veterans organizations to see some of the returning vets from Iraq and Afghanistan and so forth. There's no question it's already started, like it did with Vietnam vets and Korean vets before that and World War II vets. So I hope you go out of your way to try to locate some people that may need help.
Mr. Mincy.
I have a question from Captain Sloan about how much time, or prior to their going to this location, they were homeless, they were in your treated somewhere. About how long is it so you know they're eligible now for this particular project?
It would be entirely up to the individual, depending on their progress in the program. The outside would be probably about two and a quarter years, something like that would be the longest time they would be in a transition and or shelter, those kinds of things. But during that time, of course, they'd be being stabilized and being educated and being rehabilitated somewhat. So when people go into this program, it's a permanent situation with a disability versus a transitional program with a disability. So it could be as little as 3 months. Depends on the individual and how motivated they are.
Thank you.
Comments?
Just one more item, if I may. Staff was, when this project was first proposed, staff suggested the idea of conducting the open house within the neighborhood and having the community meeting to try and address any concerns that neighbors would have. And it's mentioned in the report that the feedback we received was very minimal. At the same time, the Army conducted an open house of the existing Nancy Painter facility, and residents were invited to come in and review the operations, and some people did come in. It's not mentioned in the report, but one thing that staff did do is that we took a look, worked with police, and took a look at the number of calls that were received at the Nancy Painter home. And I want to say it was over a year. I want to say it was a 2-year period we looked at, and there were no visits or incidences reported at the Nancy Painter house. And as I mentioned before, the Nancy Painter house is a transitional housing project, not permanent. So it is a reserved for occupancy by those that are not yet ready to move into a project like the one being proposed to you.
Okay, as for my comments, it's back on the architecture. I don't know you people that worked on did one of you design this?
Steve Kaczynski.
No. Well, if you're eligible to be on the design review board, you might submit application. This is an extremely unusual site, and for you to get 4 units on there and make it look as good, it's what we so often talk about in our single-family dwelling unit areas, working with the lot and making the dwelling unit fit on that particular lot. That's exactly what you did here. It could have been done in a very lousy fashion. I mean, you've got play areas, you've got walks, access for fire. It's a kind of architecture we need more of in this city. So if you are eligible, please submit the resume. They got them downstairs right below us here. I like it. If we can just get Caltrans now to water the slope and turn it green, we'd be extremely happy. And that, yeah, it's a great job. So it meets code in just about every way we could think of. Thank you very much. Okay, there's been a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Authority members Draymond.
Yes.
Mincy.
Yes.
Najarian.
Yes.
Barazian.
Yes.
Quintero.
Yes.
Yusefian.
Aye.
Chairman Weaver.
Aye. What is next, please?
Is there any new business? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Stand adjourned at 3:07 p.m.
Which one would you do guys?
What is next?
What would you like to take next?
Why don't you do redevelopment so quick?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Glendale redevelopment meeting of November 6, 2007. May we have